understand that the same sort of power elite, your tendency is to think of the power elite as political and economic, like Rockefeller, and, they're the oil and so forth. But remember, and people just sort of say, yeah, and then they dismiss it. They continue to think of Rockefeller and, George Soros and Maurice Strong and these guys, and Gorbachev, as simply political figures or, with great wealth or something. But remember, it's really important to remember that the Rockefeller Brothers Fund in 1959, when it published that report, the Mid-Century Challenge to American Foreign Policy, they said in there that it has fallen to us, history has given to us the task of building a new world order. And in that, they listed, social, economic, political, and then they said spiritual. They put the word spiritual. You don't think of Rockefeller as spiritual, but they realize that you have to get control of the spiritual values of people, the moral value, whatever you want to call it, spiritual values. And they've used various, they sort of watered down Catholicism. They attack fundamentalism. Fundamentalists are sort of narrow-minded, old-fashioned people, old fogies, right? And they introduce New Age stuff and so forth and so on. And the same thing with Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater, when he wrote his book With No Apologies in, I think it was 1979, he said the same thing. He said the Trilateral Commission, which Rockefeller had set up in 1973, it not only wanted political, economic, and social control, it wanted, he said, ecclesiastical, which is, spiritual as well. So they want spiritual and ecclesiastical control. Spiritual, which means any spirituality, like Dr. Stan says, we fight against principalities and powers. And ecclesiastical, which means the formal structure. They actually want to get control of the standard Methodist and Baptist and Catholics and so forth, the standard hierarchy of the organizational structure and so on. And that's why that letter that I think it was John D. Rockefeller III wrote to the Pope. I think it was Pope Paul VI in the mid-'60s. And he says, get with it or you're going to be left behind. You need to go along with, various means of birth control, pardon me, and so forth. Literally sort of threatening the Pope. And that's their attitude. They have to have spiritual and ecclesiastical control over these things. And there's various ways of doing this, and that's their plan. It has to be a total control because, as Alice Bailey said in 1933, that by the year 2025, the World Federation of Nations will be taking rapid shape. And remember, Alice Bailey was into occultism and Lucifer and published by Lucifer Publishing and so forth and so on. And her husband, Foster Bailey, in 1972, wrote Running God's Plan, God's Plan. We are the enforcers. And Barbara Marx Hubbard, as part of this whole funded movement, talked about the defective seeds. Those who resist us are defective seeds. And she said, don't worry about it. We, the leaders of the sort of New Age, New Religion movement, we will be the riders of the pale horse death. We'll, just eliminate these people who resist us. And so this is all part of the plan. It's not just political and economic. It's spiritual, ecclesiastical, and so on. And that's why I was just talking to a person who calls into your show sometimes, Ron, up in the state of Washington, and he ran for superintendent. I was just a few minutes on the phone with him. I said, that's why it's very, very important up in Washington how Dr. Shirley McCune, who was with the Mid-Continent Regional Educational Lab, and I'm very familiar with them because when I was with the Reagan administration, we funded up to 49% about 20 labs and centers around the country. I had to monitor the Center for Social Organization schools in Johns Hopkins. But she was at the Mid-Continent Regional Educational Lab. And after she left that, while she was there, I have a videotape where she's in Kansas saying we're going to transform education, all of education. She didn't just mean, books and reading and math. She meant the values as well. And so from there she went to Arizona, and the superintendent of there, I have an article from the Arizona Republic where the superintendent down there some years ago said that teachers should be more respected than parents. And so from there, Shirley McCune went up to the state of Washington with Burleson or Bergeson, something like that, the superintendent. Now, why is that important? Because Shirley McCune is an occultist. She actually co-authored a book called The Light Will Set You Free, where she's getting, the Ascended Master, Joao Kul and Kudumi, and all of this stuff that Alice Bailey is getting. We're channeling, information to her. And so Washington is a very important state, and you say, what's that got to do with Rockefeller? Well, I have a memo that's been published in the book that's carried by Radio Liberty, my 200-year education chronology, from Seattle. It's the Seattle Memorandum, where Jim Grob, who's head of the Rockefeller Project in Seattle, says the public, the parents have caught on to us with this global education, so we got to change the name of it to multicultural education. So here you have the nexus of all these, the occult, the Rockefellers, and Shirley MacLaine in the state of Seattle, and there's this plan. It's all national and global, and it does, as Dr. Sand said, include the spiritual element as well.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a moment.
While the storm clouds gather.
Well, Dennis, you've got 3 minutes to wrap up the program. Go right ahead.
Well, again, the summary, it's all-inclusive. They can't leave anything out. They can't just leave it to the politics or economic control because people's values might get in the way. You attack them through various means. Mental health, for example, in my series that Dr. Stan has there, Mental Health Education, Social Control. The very first chapter I put John Rawlings Reese in 1940 in the journal called Mental Health, saying that we're going to control things, and we've made a useful attack, he uses that word attack, upon 2 professions, that's education and the church. I mean, he just says that. And so they get their people in place. Alger Hiss gets his buddy Brock Chisholm to be the first head of the World Health Organization, and then Brock Chisholm in the February issue of Psychiatry in 1946 writes that, the real problem is the concept of right and wrong taught to the little children by their parents, their priests, and the teachers. We got to get rid of that. We just got to get rid of that. And so you have people like Ted Sizer coming along in 1970 in the introduction to 5 lectures on moral education, saying all this Christian sermonizing is hurting the children. We have to have moral autonomy. And so he becomes a big shot at Brown University, and the chairman of, I think, of Reader's Digest later, 30 years later, gave him like $500 million, right now $50 million or whatever, a huge amount of money to further what he thought was a good idea. That's Ted Sizer at Brown University in terms of what education should be. And then now you have Common Core, and as I said previously, Common Core isn't just like the Clintons. You're trying to use standards to develop a national curriculum. They're now using testing because if you have the College Board with David Coleman having their alignment between the College Board, SAT, you're also lassoing in the private schoolers, religious schoolers, homeschoolers. If they want to get a good college education, you got to do well on the SAT. And so they're being coerced to accept Common Core, which is not just the educational aspect, pardon me, but a data-gathering aspect, and it has questions on there related to values as well. So it's a massive national and international program.
Well, Dennis, I want to thank you very much for all the work that you do, and I look forward to being with you again next Friday at the same time.